So, in The Lost Lands was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson and stars Mila Jovovich and Dave Bautista. And according to the plot synopsis on IMDb, it's about a queen who sends the powerful and feared sorceress Grey Alice to the ghostly wilderness of the Lost Lands in a search of a magical power where the sorceress and her guide, the Drifter Boyce, must outwit and outfight man and demon. So, I had to read the synopsis to you because I was watching the movie and I couldn't tell what was going on. So let's talk about this movie. So I was not looking forward to this movie. I didn't know this was a short story by George R. R. Martin. I knew who Paul W. Anderson is. He's directed the majority of the Resident Evil movies, and his wife Mila Jovovich is the lead actress in it. I've only seen the first Resident Evil movie, and I'm like, I'm done. And I heard they only got worse from there. So, and I also noticed a few other things with this movie. I noticed this movie would constantly play during the commercials in front of any movie. It's like, okay, you're not playing in front of the act during the actual trailers, just in the commercials. So that's kind of odd. And as a result, this movie also happened to open at number 10 at the box office, which, given how low the box office is these days, that's really bad. It's it made less money this weekend than Mufasa the Lion King, and that movie has been out since December. And after watching this movie last night in a theater by myself, I can see why. This is one of the most incomprehensible pieces of shit that I've seen. Wow. And it's not something like Craven the Hunter, where I at least had a good time watching it and I was just laughing throughout it. Honestly, I didn't even have a good time. I can watch a bad movie that's so bad it's good and think, okay, I didn't think that was good, but at least I had fun watching it. But this movie makes the critical mistake of taking itself way too seriously. This movie is so serious. It did the exact opposite. It tried so hard to be good that it was bad. In this case, it was really bad. Holy shit. I hated this movie. I loathe this movie. It is so dumb and so pointless and so, again, incomprehensible that when someone asked me what did I think of it afterwards, I'm like, I had no clue what I just witnessed. It's that bad. It really is that bad. Is there anything in this movie that works? Um, there's like one or two moments that are at least funny unintentionally. That's it. And also, the performance of one actress, her name is Amara Okereke. I may be mispronouncing that. I apologize. She was the only one who I felt like was at times giving a performance that kind of matched what I felt like this movie should be. Whereas, like, it's clearly over the top and campy, and you're clearly not caring as much as clearly everyone else is, or in this case, isn't. Because the main characters themselves, played by Dave Bautista and Mila Jovovich, who also produced this movie, are so boring. They have no real personalities, no real character. They are just cardboard cutouts of characters. They are the most boring characters I have seen in a movie like this in a long time. And almost, actually, I was going far as to say they're worse than the characters in Borderlands. That's how bland they are. Again, this movie also takes itself way too seriously. Like, literally everything is like said with the utmost importance. And because this movie, again, is so ridiculous and there's so much going on, and again, the other characters themselves are very generic, I honestly was just so bored. There's like, it's devoid of any character, or dare I say, like, even some lightheartedness at times. I get it, it's an apocalyptic wasteland, but you could still make your characters at least a little bit more interesting than just these dull cardboard cutouts. And somehow the side characters are even worse. I couldn't remember any of their names. I couldn't remember what their motive was. All I know is that pretty much every character in this movie is pretty much a bad guy in some way. They're all stupid. Also, no subtlety whatsoever. I criticized Mickey 17 thinking, oh, that movie wasn't very subtle at all. I apologize to Bong Joon-ho now because that movie is subtle compared to In the Lost Lands. When you see some imagery, oh my god, it is the most generic imagery I have seen. My God, it is so bad. Like, there's also one character who's shot and killed towards the end of the movie. Spoiler, I won't say who, but like, the way they die is literally like this. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Literally and figuratively. This movie, I hated it. I really hated it. I did not have a good time watching this movie. The storyline itself is just very confusing at times, and they try to make everything make sense in the end, but it's like I was still lost half the time. I can watch Inception over and over again and have that make sense to me more than this movie. That is how incomprehensible it is. I can watch Inception and understand it completely more than this. It is so horribly edited at times. The horrible slow motion. It looks like one of those movies. Like, remember in that era, like around the time when Inception came out, actually, like in the 2010s after Avatar came out, when 3D movies, or maybe even before then, I'm not entirely sure. 3D sucks, but like it's not in 3D. But this movie really wanted to be in 3D. There's like a few sequences involving like the guy throws snakes and they're like throwing. It's like, whoa, look at the snakes. It's like it's in 3D and it's in slow motion and such, and it looks embarrassing. Holy shit! I hated the slow motion in this movie. It is annoying when they just throw it in there just for the sake of throwing it in there. It's not effective anymore. The CGI is awful. Awful. It looks really bad. Also, this movie, um, it pretty much rips off a lot of other movies. There are times where I'm watching it and I'm like, I think of like other movies and TV shows that did something similar. Like, okay, oh, that reminds me of Mad Max. Oh, this reminds me of Westworld. And there was even a moment where, like, I'm thinking of Mortal Engines. I don't think anyone else remembers that movie, but I do. And maybe the filmmakers behind this movie do as well. It rips off a lot of things to make this concoction of bullshit. Like, this movie is awful. And for a movie that exposits so damn much, there is also so many things in this movie that don't make sense. Ugh, I hate it when movies do that. It's like you over explain to the point of absurdity, and yet there's so many absurd things that should be explained that you're not going to. And what makes this movie worse is that, again, I could not find myself enjoying anything. If this movie was at least kind of aware that this movie was ridiculous or goofy or over the top, then I probably would enjoy it a little bit more than I actually did. It's not even so bad it's good. They try so hard to be so good that it winds up being bad. I can watch a bad movie that makes me laugh. I'd also rather watch a movie that makes me angry before I'd rather watch this. Because if I'm laughing in a bad movie, I'm at least feeling something. If I'm watching a movie that makes me mad, I'm at least feeling something. But if I'm watching a movie like In the Lost Lands and feel myself losing IQ points as I'm watching it and feel nothing else, no emotion whatsoever, then that is worse. I'd rather be mad than feel nothing. How is that possible? This movie is atrocious. This movie is dull. It's dumb. It's awful. Oh my. Oh, I hated a lot of this movie. No, not a lot. I hated everything about this movie. This movie is truly atrocious. I can clearly understand why I was the only person in the theater watching it. It is embarrassingly bad. It is shockingly bad. I don't know how this movie got made. I don't know how people came attached to this movie. Okay, maybe Paul W.S. Anderson, but almost said Paul Thomas Anderson there, but no, he actually makes good movies, not Paul W.S. Anderson. So, yeah, this movie's shit. In the Lost Lands, do not bother. There are times where it can be enjoyably bad. There's like one performance that is like clearly what this movie should be like, but everything else is either too serious, too dull, or too stupid. The characters are incredibly bland, not just our heroes, but even the side characters. The storyline is confusing to the point where I'm like, what is even going on in this movie? The editing, atrocious. They cut around so much that I couldn't even tell what was happening. It is bad. It rips off other movies. The CGI, the slow-mo, everything else about this movie, the over exposition, like over expositing everything and not explaining other things that probably should be explained. And again, I felt bored watching this movie. I felt bored. I'd rather be mad than, feel bored while watching something. Now I am feeling mad because I'm just ranting about this movie. I'm honestly not going to be surprised if this movie winds up in my top 3 worst movies of 2025. Right now, it's number 1. If this movie is not the worst movie of 2025, I am in for some shit. Oh boy. I am giving In the Lost Lands 0 out of 4 stars. Skip it. Just how? How did anything in this movie come about? I can't even say, go watch it. It's fun. But no, it sucks. It really does suck. So, did you see In the Lost Lands? And if you did, I'm sorry. What was the last movie that you truly despised? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat, and just don't see this movie.